LinkedIn Live show, and we talk about everything on this show: life, love, and everything in between. Because you know what? Corporate culture is created by human beings, and human beings have emotions, and human beings are complex creatures. And we talk about everything that goes on in a human being's life and this complex behavior. So, whether you're tuning in from Malaysia, Houston, Texas, or wherever you are from the world, please do drop a comment right now and tell me where you are from. I'll put a comment right here. Hello. Where are you from? So please let me know where you're from. It's always interesting to see people from all over the world tune into my shows, and I would love to hear what you're doing, what you're working on, what kind of companies you are in or have founded, or whatever you're doing, whatever is interesting to you right at this moment in time. Please let us know in the comments. As always, we love questions here on this show. So whatever questions or comments that you have, please go ahead and tell me about it. We have Salinun. How are you, old friend of mine, from KL? KL, Kuala Lumpur. That's right. Hey, Lynn, nice to see you. Who else is out there? Please let me know just like Lynn was doing, how to address her, and where you're from, what you do. We have many people already on board, so I'm glad to see that. And we have a fantastic guest tonight. She used to be the CHRO of a company, and now she's founded her own company, and she's the CEO of that organization. We will find out a lot more about her in just a minute. I'm just giving an opportunity for our friends to come on board. Zalika is from Kelantan. That's also in Malaysia on the East Coast. She's pursuing a degree in tourism management. Awesome. Noriman, apparently Mrs. MIRC with his short forms. Yes, ASL. What about you, man? Tell me your ASL, please, Noriman. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate all your support of my content. And again, any questions, comments is more than appreciated. Hey, Andrew from Kuala Lumpur. He has a startup. Awesome. So you can talk about that as well. But without further ado, I give you, ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Houston, Texas, Tonia Emery. Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Great. Fantastic. It is early morning there in Houston.
It is.
It's 8 a.m.
Yes,
Yeah, that's not that early. That's good.
not
That's a
that
good
bad.
time. It is 9:06 p.m. here in Malaysia. We're winding down the day, and the show typically, the reason I chose this time, Tonya, is because it's early morning in the States, and I have a sizable following from the States. And for Malaysians, it's the end of the day. It's after dinner. They're chilling, so it's a good compromise because of the time differences are freaky.
That's right.
It's
And it's good for a cup of coffee and a chat.
That's right. And, who would have thought that somebody from Texas and somebody from Kuala Lumpur can get together and, have a chat? It's
I
just
love it.
amazing what LinkedIn allows us to do. Many other people are on the show right now. Thank you, Nora Zliani. She's from Labuan. Apa kabar, orang Labuan? And we have a Noriman from Penang. So, Tonya, before I go into what you do and your career and all of this good stuff, we love to play a game here on this show called Culturism, and it is called 10 Questions. And you don't know what these questions are,
Oh my
and
goodness.
you are going to answer in a rapid fire fashion 10 questions so that we can all figure out who is behind this persona that is Tonia Emery. So,
Do I get a
your
planner?
first question is you. The first question for you is, what is one thing that you are absolutely determined to do, determined to accomplish? What would that be?
Build better leaders.
Wow. All right. Wonderful. We will talk about that later. Uh, if you had a job, what job would you be terrible at? You'll get fired from this job.
Being an accountant.
I'm sure you have to manage your finances now anyway, Tanya, but being
Not
an
hired.
accountant. Okay. All right. We'll take that answer. What is the best way to start the day?
A cup of coffee. A cup of
Ah,
coffee, quiet time.
Yum. And you are a morning person. So what time
Yeah.
do you typically get up in the morning?
I would say 5:30, no later than 6.
Wow. So it's still
Mm,
dark out, or is the sun up
mm,
already? Or-
Still dark,
Nice. And
quiet, people are sleeping, dogs are sleeping.
beautiful, beautiful. That's actually the same time that I get up, about 5:30. So it is a beautiful time of day, and I do a lot of videos at that time as well. And the sun
Mm.
is coming up, and it's quiet. You hear the birds chirping. It's awesome. I love it. All right, that was question 3, and question 4 is, what's worth spending more money to get the best?
Ooh, talent. Talent in an
Nice,
organization. Mm,
nice. So get the best that you can afford.
Yep.
We have Carlene from Oceanside, California. 6 a.m. there. Hey, that's early. Thanks for joining, Carlene. We have another question for Tanya. And how do you relax after a hard day of work?
Ooh, I would say I love to read. So it's grabbing a little bit of quiet time, even if it's just 30 minutes an hour. I like to unwind by reading, and I watch documentaries. My children make fun of me because it's like weird documentary stuff. It could be health, it could be Princess Diana, it could be anything. So
All right. So that's how you wind down, stimulating the brain, either
yeah.
with a book or a documentary. Nice. What is one thing that you do that people have told you is really annoying?
Wait, I have to. So okay, so I'm huge on accountability and the accountability ladder. And so I have it on my refrigerator, and people really get annoyed that I'm always asking them to look at the accountability ladder and where they're at. It's not always a coaching moment. I think so. My kids get tired of their coaching moments with the accountability ladder.
That's a good one. All right. What is something you think everyone should try? Everyone should do at least once in their lives.
Ooh. Completely change your career path. Like change what you do.
Wow, I have done that. So we can talk about that as well. It was liberating. It was actually fantastic for my career right now. But that is a good one. Completely change your career path.
Completely.
That's wonderful. If you could turn any activity into an Olympic sport, what would you have a chance to get an Olympic gold medal at?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, that's a really good one. So it has to be something I would win.
Yeah, what could you win an Olympic medal at? But then now you have the opportunity to turn anything into an Olympic sport.
Wow. Well, I think that's a really good one because I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of the things that I would love and I'd be really great at. Is I help people set really hard stretch goals, but I don't know if that could be an Olympic
Yeah,
sport.
of
You
course
know,
it could. Yeah, well, I'll be the judge of that, and we'll
Mhm.
see which stretch goals are the hardest and who
That's right.
does it best.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we'll make that a sport for 2028, whatever, whenever the Olympic comes around. So, Tanya, do you have an irrational fear, and what would it be?
Oh my goodness, I've had many. So I think the first irrational fear I had that I worked through was the fear of like failing, being so this perfectionism that I was always seeking. And that was like from very, very young. I was always the kid with straight A's and, the good kid that didn't really break rules. And so I kind of had this, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if I fail or I make a mistake or I'm not perfect? And I think that carried me through my 20s, maybe even early 30s. And I finally just realized I'm crazily imperfect, and I make mistakes all the time. And those were my biggest learnings. And so I think maybe now the one that I battle is this because I have such a big passion of making a difference. I want to leave a legacy of in this space of culture and leadership and performance is maybe the fear of being irrelevant. Did I do everything that I wanted to do? Did I really make a difference? Did I have a profound impact on someone that made them live their life better because of it? So maybe just, is what I'm doing relevant? Is what I'm doing impactful?
Right.
Does it
Nice.
matter?
So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's irrational. I think that is something that drives you. But yeah, it could get in the way if you're too worried and too afraid if you're making a difference or not from
Yeah.
actually taking action, right? So yeah, we always say authenticity over perfection, because perfection really can stop you in your tracks if you're aiming for that. So don't worry about it. You are making a difference to lots and lots of people, Tonia. So keep on doing what you're doing. And the final question, this is the same question I ask all my guests, is that who is the kindest person you have met personally? And can you tell us a story about him or her?
Well, the first one that pops into mind, because I've met a lot of truly kind people, but I saw this really great kind act, and it strangely happened the night before 9/11. I was working for 24 Hour Fitness at the time, and I was at the first launch of a Magic Johnson club, and this guy is busy. He's larger than life. He's got this massive following. There's thousands of people there, and he's got a really tight schedule and this entourage like moving him through his schedule. And it was this media and this interview and here and there. And I watched him like tell everyone to stop, and he started signing basketballs for these young kids. And he was getting pressured to kind of keep going along his agenda. And he sat and threw everybody off. And I could see people kind of like, oh gosh, kind of rejigging the schedule because he wanted to stop. He knew this was his first opening, and it was the kids. It was giving back to these kids who were just like screaming his name and so excited to see him and meet him. And I was like, wow, that's so kind-hearted to these young kids. And it was late. So 9, 10 o'clock at night, and these kids are standing in line just to get a glimpse of them. And I was like, wow, that's top notch.
Wow. As a basketball fan, that really resonates with me. That's an amazing story. Are you a Houston Rockets fan?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm not a huge, what's funny is I'm not a huge sports fan to go just in general, but I use sports analogies all the time for team performance and leadership. I've never really got the wave of that. I lived in Pittsburgh for a while, and I had to be a sports fan because they are diehard for all their teams. But not, I wouldn't say I'm over the top. I'm not jerseyed out and have the big foam finger.
Well, neither am I, but I do enjoy sports. So that you got through your 10 questions. Congratulations, Tonia.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Tonia Emery, all the way from Houston, Texas. Let's find out more about what she does, actually. So, what is this company that you founded, and what do you do?
Okay, so I would say, in a nutshell, it's a management consulting company, and I focus on a very niche group of products and services. And so my 20 plus years in HR, I had to sit and really think about this. Like, what do I want to do? What do I not want to do? Because there's things that we all can do. We're capable and we're competent, but it doesn't light my fire. And so I sat with a piece of paper and just wrote it out. And what I came down with is, from the consulting side, I call it the talent trifecta. And it's performance, culture, and leadership. And they're all so intertwined and connected. And in that kind of group of services, I will tell you, here's what I do. I help organizations from the strategic perspective, whether it's going through the strategic planning and deployment and then connecting top senior level executives' performance objectives. There's that stretch big goal that I like to help people get. But I don't do performance forums. I'm not the admin of that stuff. So it's really the strategy. When it comes to culture, because culture is such a complex space because there's so many things moving. And that's why I always call it the trifecta. You have to address all elements of that. And culture, it's really, again, working with the CEO, because culture comes from the CEO's direction. And I think a lot of times people get confused that it's an HR function, or the head of people has to drive culture, or people that actually have the position of culture, whatever the title might be. But you have to take that direction from the CEO. So sometimes it's just helping facilitate a CEO to articulate the behaviors, the actions, that what are people doing? Every time I do this, I ask the CEO, what are people doing in your culture? What are they doing? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And then how does that connect to the values? Because people sometimes think that values is culture, and it's not, it's just a piece. And then the last piece is leadership. So I work with executive coaching. So the executive coaching side of my business is the one-on-one private. I'll do team coaching, where I use assessments to help people understand personality, emotional intelligence, driving forces and motivators. And how does that fit on the team? How does that dynamic work to achieve the outcomes? And I also do a leadership development programming. So I'll help with corporate university structure, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So that's it. And then that's it. And that's all I do on the consulting side. So I do have some products and online courses for leaders. You know, during COVID, it was interesting because everybody kind of shut down and was trying to figure out how to get the workforce at home and keep them productive. And I thought, well, the consulting side kind of went down because people didn't want to spend and everybody was very overwhelmed with the pandemic. And so I stepped away for about 6 months and built a leadership mastermind program online so people could get their hands on it. Because my experience over the years was I can help organizations build great leadership programs, but they're not accessible to all. They're usually handpicked, or it's the top 24, or it's only run once or twice a year. And so the masses weren't getting exposure to the robust opportunity. So I built the program end to end and, had so much fun doing it. And I researched and came up with a competency framework that was validated by boards and CEOs and C-suite executives. And then I went and developed a course from there, saying, okay, if these are the 18 competencies leaders must have, then let me go build this course. And so I put it all in one spot, and it's self-paced, and there's coaching and tools and resources and workbooks. And it's out there for anyone who wants to be great and wants to really change their leadership game. So I don't know, that might spin into some more online courses and products, but right now that's my kind of baby, my pride and joy is the leadership mastermind, because I feel like the leaders are what are going to build and develop culture.
Exactly. And I want to stay where you were saying that there's a small group of people who really want to be great. And they're distinct from the general public, right? They're distinct from everyone else because they really want to take a stand. They invest in themselves. And so how do you find these people? How do you get people to buy into the program and, join you?
Well, it's funny because I had to learn this. I'm a IO psychologist and an OD practitioner. And so I've learned marketing that I don't think I wanted to be a marketer, but you have to when you run your own business. And really analytics was a big one. So I started doing kind of social media advertising and then looking at who was really interested. So I got where are they in the world, gender, age, all of that, and started analyzing who's actually staying in the ads and the posts and who's going and downloading the stuff, because I wasn't sure. I had my assumptions that were all blown to pieces. I just thought everybody wants to be a great leader. Everybody's going to be so excited for these materials. Everybody wants it. And everybody didn't want it. And there was almost like a bell curve. And the majority of the folks were in the middle, and they were okay. They're doing fine. They're not rocking the boat. They're under the radar. They're comfortable. And that's a big population. They didn't want the product because they're good. They got the money. They got the title. Whatever. They're happy. They're not uncomfortable with their status quo. And, the lower end of that spectrum, the people that are derailed or even toxic, that small group, we all know there's going to be a handful of those. they of course are not going to jump into a high-performing leadership program. It's this very small group that I call high potentials, or the difference makers, the change makers, that small group. And so they are out there already looking because they want to learn, they want to grow, they're open to that feedback. They want to perform at their best. They want to accelerate, whether it be down their career path or just raise their game. They wake up with that fire on their belly. So they're already out there. I'm still working with the algorithms to find out, like, I thought it would be, strangely, I thought I had this thing in my mind that it would be more women, and it was actually more men. And, I had this passion for developing female leaders, and I was a little sad. I'm like, why aren't more women getting after this and doing this? And so really it's data. It's looking at the data. Who's really interested in being a badass leader?
Nice. That, I think, is true to all developmental work. Really, if you're in a large company, not everybody wants to be on the developmental track, right? Not everybody wants to be fast-tracked. And you really need to find those individuals, like you said, who are really willing to invest in themselves and willing to put in the work to become great. So that's fantastic. Has that also translated to the stuff you do in this trifecta that you're hands-on working with your clients as well?
Yes. I find, especially with the strategy work and the real game-changing, like around culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, there's got to be enough dissatisfaction with what's going on in the organization. And I think COVID pushed the envelope for a lot of companies and shook them up, because it was a disruptor that they couldn't control. And they had to really rethink how employees work and how culture is built. And the traditional ways of everybody must come to the office between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. and be at their desk X amount of hours to be productive and performing has been shaken. And it really has challenged it. So what I saw, it's this same. It's almost like, so if you had that bell curve of leaders, it's that bell curve of companies that are okay. They're looking to stabilize. They're not looking to innovate. They're looking to keep status quo. And there's some toxic cultures out there and toxic companies. They're not looking to raise the game. And then there's that small group. And I find them to be more small to mid-sized companies that are still in that innovation growth mode. And the bigger, harder ships to turn are in the middle. So yeah, it's a small group. And I've accepted that the world isn't as fired up as I am about performance and leadership and culture. And that I just really need to cater to that small group of people that want it.
Exactly. People who want it. I mean, if you preach to people who radically don't want it, that's just sucks your time and energy, doesn't it? So I'm grateful that we're in a relatively large company, and we have a CEO who realizes what you just said. It's the smaller companies that are hungry and want the change. So he said, even though we're 33 years old this year, we want to act like a startup. So I think this is one of the things that he was alluding to, that we need to be hungry for change and we need to keep on innovating. If not, we'll be sinking. So that's amazing insight from you right there. What kind of companies do you work for right now? I mean, are they in all industries or mainly in what kind of areas?
Interestingly, tech seems to be the popular one right now. So I've had to work hard to break the oil and gas energy mold. When you spend over a decade in energy, people forget that I had almost a decade in retail, multi-unit retail. So I've had a small stint in healthcare. But I find right now the clients that have been most open to this type of work are tech companies, because they want to, they're just, the innovation culture, I think, is already there. The fast pace, open to something that hasn't even been thought of yet, is there. A small energy company, I would say, but the bigger ones right now are just, the energy industry is really being impacted by COVID, and the whole oil and gas sector has been impacted pretty bad. So I would say tech. Tech seems to be the company that's most open, for sure. And maybe a little bit retail. I have a retail client because they're starting to grow, and they need to figure out, that what every CEO of a startup and a small company faces is, how do I maintain this thing that I built that I'm so passionate about, and now all of a sudden I've got 2 other locations that I can't see or touch every day, and I can't see the people, and I can't talk to them, and I can't know that my culture is being protected and preserved and executed, because it evolves. I mean, as a culture professional, it evolves all the time, and you got to constantly be keeping your eye on how your culture is changing. So they're passionate about that. CEOs that are like, I want to, this is what I don't want to change. This is what I do want to change, and helping them figure out the strategies to do that.
Wonderful. Can you talk a bit about how you got to where you are? I mean, you were talking about 20 years as a HR professional. Where did you start, and what did you do? What kind of companies did you work for?
So I think I was 13 when I said I want to be a psychologist. And I tell my kids now, not everyone is like me. Not everybody knows that young what their path is. And that's okay. Try a whole bunch of different things. And then try things that you never thought you'd do. But so I went in, and that was my formal education. I was going to be a psychologist. And I remember my father dropping me off for, I was the first person in my family ever to get an education. Both my parents came from a farming community. So the fact that I picked psychology and not business or engineering, I think disappointed my dad. He wasn't a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. He's like, oh my gosh, you're the first one to go, and you're gonna be a psychologist. And I stuck with it. And he tried to convince me the whole drive to college not to do that. And then I graduated, and then I went to grad school and got my master's in counseling. And then the whole time my dad was trying to convince me to get an MBA. And I said, I'm getting my master's in counseling. And then when I started my PhD work in IO psychology, my dad was like, I'm done. Like, he knew you're not changing her mind. She's profession. And I got into HR because I was counseling. I was working in a high school, and I was working with kids like from abuse and addiction and all this stuff, and it broke my heart. And I think I realized, wow, could I do this all day long, every day? And I realized I couldn't. I think my empathy was too high. I wasn't able to create the right boundaries, to not worry about it and internalize their stress. So I did this assessment on myself because I was at a school and I had access to all these assessments, and it pointed me to HR. And at the time, I had no clue what HR was. I was in my early 20s. And then I just started applying for HR jobs. And I rolled into my first one in a large retail company, and had such a great, I learned all sorts of stuff. And I came in at just the right time because they were open. I had a chance to build things, do things, fail at things, and I was hooked. And then in that career, I was there 8 or 9 years. I had an amazing mentor who moved me in this position that I didn't want. And he said, because you're the right person to do this. And it was like staffing and organizational development. And I fell in love, and I never looked back. And oh my gosh, this is the part of HR I want to practice. Because it suited what I was educated to do, but it really fueled me to be part of finding the right people, developing the right people, helping those people perform. And I just kind of went from there. And the last decade, I've been blessed that organizational development and organizational effectiveness is more in the forefront, and it's gaining the respect that I think that it deserves. And it's not a function that was around 20 years ago, really. And really, people thought it was training. Oh, we've got to get training people. But OE people are not just training people.
Exactly. So how did you get into culture?
So, and I think my bold passion for leadership and performance is how culture kind of got woven into that. Because some companies just don't really pay attention to culture. It's not like something that's on the agenda. It's comp or benefits or payroll and all those mechanical things that have to happen and have to happen well. And so the performance culture leadership, the trifecta, is the last decade, really, I would say, because I had the chance to help senior executives see from a systemic approach. Like this isn't just a silo. It's all connected. We're all connected in an organization. So you can't just change your performance management system and not engage and develop the leaders to understand their role in that system? Or how do the decisions around pay for performance impact the culture of performance when you pay someone that didn't perform, don't pay people equitably? Now you're impacting culture. And so when I started speaking like that, it intrigued. I was lucky enough to work at a company where the chairman of the board was passionate about performance culture and leadership. And so he pushed the senior team to do more in that space. And so I got a chance to come in and do some great work. And I think what sealed the deal for me is working with one of the best CEOs that I've been lucky enough to work with, who went culture first. And like when he became the CEO of a company, he knew he was at the company already as a CFO. He knew the culture was toxic. He had silos. He had people weaponizing information. He had inefficiencies because everybody didn't trust each other. So everybody was building their own little departments, and he wanted to fix it. And he said, we have to come in and change culture. And that's when I said, let's go to breakfast. And we sat over coffee and I said, tell me what culture means. Like, what do you say when you say the new culture? And I just took notes. I listened and asked questions for an hour. And at the end, he's like, yeah, that's what I want the culture to be. And so I said, give me till the end of the day. And I put it all on one slide, one infographic for him. And he called me. He's like, this is exactly everything I said. And I said, great. Now your job as the CEO is to put on the vest, because people are going to attack this, because this is so different than what the old culture was. And there are going to be people that are going to want to pull that culture back because that's what we know. And you're introducing things that they've never seen before, like fun. And fun for him, a cultural element of fun meant I want people to laugh at work again. I want people to leave and go home to their families. I don't want people here 15 hours a day, every day. That's not what we want, because if we're high performers and we're efficient in that performance, you can go home and have a life. And so I said, great, protect it, because they're going to, and even your senior team, you're going to have pushback. And he went through about 30 days of that pushback. And I remember being in a meeting where he looked at me and it was like, we knew. I was like, don't you back down. This is your culture. Like, you want this. Get them through their discomfort. Get them through their pushback. You decide. You decide two things in this company, culture and vision. And you get to say, I'm the decision maker on that. And then the next step, once he got his senior team aligned in an agreement, was communicating it to the world. And so he did all these road shows, and culture started being baked into every single message that went out to the business, because that's how it was brought to life. Now he's saying, this is our new culture, and we're not there yet. We're going to start measuring it. But this is what I want, and this is where I see us in a year, and this is where we need to be in a year. And these are the behaviors that I want to see people behaving, and these are the standards. And so he just basically was bringing it to life over and over and over and over again for about 60 days. And so HR was able to come in, and this is where HR is pivotal, because fun was new. It was like, okay, now we need a whole different, can people be part-time? Can people work from home? Then it's like, how do we program this? How do we facilitate this? How do we put processes and systems in place that bring this to life? And it was like, I was sold, because then I saw it change, like measurable change, because we were measuring it every 60 days. And people were feeling different. People were behaving different. People were thinking different. And people were performing different. And to this day, he's like, it was the best hour and a half of my career as a CEO, because I saw it come to life. Like, people actually started changing and behaving, and the bad ones left. I'm like, they'll leave, and they'll leave pretty quick, because they don't want this. The good ones will stay, and the rest will start to come along. They need to trust it. But yeah, I was sold. I was like, man, this works. This stuff works. What the books are saying works.
There's a reason it works, because there's a reason that they have that research. One of the many things I find amazing about this story, it's an amazing story, that the CFO is saying these things. I mean, the CFO that became CEO, because you all have our assumptions about CFOs. They're the tight ones that don't want change, right? They're the ones who want to control things. But obviously he grew, as a person as well, and assumed this role of the CEO and as a leader, and had all these visions, which is amazing. I could resonate as well because we have a relatively new CEO, and he came in with very clear visions on what the culture should be. And for us as practitioners, I'm used to being the last to update the executive team or last to update the board, right? We're on the end of the agenda. So now we are right up front, before finance, before sales, before revenue, before all these new businesses. Let's talk about people and culture first. So I'm super excited about this, what's going on in my company right now, because there's this improved focus on making sure culture and people is done right. So I'm so happy to hear that story from you.
Oh, you know what's funny? And I think that's the new wave in our profession, in HR. And I think maybe for boards out there, like, I think boards are trained through their, with lots of expertise, and they've got to manage a lot of pieces. And they got this delicate balance of, how do I advise as a board and not get in and do for the management team? And you're right, they're part of the culture. They're part of the direction of the culture. Your story, this story I shared, having the board matters, because it will influence the CEO for sure.
Of course.
And so I think that's part of that system. When you're trying to build and change culture, you have to look at all the interconnected pieces that are going on and address them all, assess and diagnose and address them all.
You mentioned that you were passionate about building female leaders and women leaders as well. And I do volunteer for the 30% Club, which fights to get at least 30% representation of women on boards of public listed companies, as well as in the C-suite here in Malaysia. So it is a global effort. But in Malaysia, we've been quite successful in moving more women into boards and into the C-suite. But I think, I don't have the data, but personally, I think a lot of this more empathy and caring at the boards is directly correlated to more women on the boards, because I'm a guy, but hey, I think it's true. I think people are more compassionate and, have a holistic way of looking at things now with more women on the boards.
I think you're right. I had a CEO tell me once, he was pretty fiery and a lot of testosterone, big ego, not arrogant, but big ego. So, and that's typical when you're rising the ranks, because you have to have a level of that type of passion to do that work. But he told me every time I was in the room that that he had to lower it a little bit. Like, it was like a gut check for him that he couldn't be his normal self. Like, he had to have more composure. And I said, well, that's interesting. And because I was a woman, and I said, well, but you should be that respectful to everybody all the time. And we would always have these debates about it. But it was like it was a thing that he noticed, that he was like, oh, there's a woman in the room. I guess I can't lose my mind here on everybody. So.
That's amazing. So I think it's about time to ask you this question that I ask all of my guests on this show is, how would you define corporate culture?
So I would say a couple words that have to be in the definition, there's lots of them out there, is evolving. An evolving, complex, interconnected system that represents an organization's norms, values, behaviors, actions, thoughts, but it's got to be, it's evolving and it's connected and it's very complex. But it is that representation. And so I work with a company that started one way, and within 2 years, because of the business shifts and the growth of the company, is now describing, the employees are describing the culture differently. And I don't think it's a positive shift. And so it's because our behaviors are tolerated and decisions are made and communicated or not. And everything that's done is contributing. Everything that's done, particularly top down, is impacting culture. So this evolving, interconnected, complex system that represents the company's, and it can't always be visionary, right? Like it has to be that point in time. You have your vision of what culture should be, and then where are you at right now? Are people living it?
Wonderful. That's a complex definition, but it is a complex, situation that you need to kind of manage. And I mean, that reflects what I do on my job as head of culture transformation at my company. We have a great question here from a pal of mine, Patpal Singh, and he says, "How do tech companies induct people quickly into the organization culture with people having shorter stints and shorter contracts nowadays?"
I think that's great. And I think the first thing is blow up everything you're doing with new employee orientation and stop teaching them about benefits and where they pick up their paycheck and all that stuff. All that stuff is a packet they take home. But if you get, especially if you're doing live, I work for a company where they somehow facilitated first day you were in orientation. I thought, wow, that's a big win, because that's a hard thing for a lot of companies to do. But 75% of the orientation was on mechanics and logistics of all of that is important. So please, I don't want anyone to think that it's not. People do need to know where they get their expense card. They do need to know that. But it's people get, and it doesn't matter if you rotate speakers, it's still the boring stuff, but you've got a live captive audience. You should be teaching them, this is our company. This is how we make money. This is what we stand for. And this is how your role contributes to that. And that's the induction. And it doesn't have to be, it could be an hour, half day or day, whatever makes sense. But give them the packet, because their first couple days, they're nervous and it's awkward, and they have time to go read all that stuff. But if you've got them captive, you bring people in and you share the vision of the company. You share how they make money, and you share how important they are. And then you teach them culture. You teach them what you want from them. And I think it engages people right away. And then the mechanisms that HR and other leaders can put in place to keep people connected to each other. That's the other thing. People want to come to work and they want to do valuable work, and they need to know what that is fast. So I'm not a fan of these, you have 4 months to set your goals. Well, that's 4 months of performance that the person is robbed of. If you're hiring someone and you're a leader, you better know what the success is of that position before their first day. You have to get them in and ramp them up. And so that to me would be the ideal induction, is bring them in, assimilate them. You're assimilating them into culture, and you can give them the administrative packet on the way home, like on the way out, and have a Q&A maybe later in the week. But teach them what you want them to be doing. Teach them what you stand for, and teach them how their role contributes to that success.
Wow, that's fantastic. And validates a lot of what I do, because I am involved in every single onboarding exercise. Any new person basically goes through me, and we do have an in-depth, hands-on, experiential kind of session. But although it's online right now, obviously, but I do get to know them, and they do get to know me, and we go through some cool scenarios of what we do and what we don't do around here. And this is how things happen around here. And it's fantastic to see people who are really excited. Of course, they're new, right? But for us, we're also blessed that we've been hiring throughout COVID, throughout working from home. Some people have never been to the office. They've been onboarded and they've been working from home. And it's amazing. So we're really blessed that our industry, is a required basically industry. Nobody can live without their phones nowadays. So it's we're doing pretty good in that sense. How have you seen COVID change companies that you work with, and what was the impact to many of the people you work with?
So I have a popular and an unpopular opinion on this topic. So the popular opinion is, wow, it really shook up HR and IT and forced people into a new space, like figuring out a new way to work. And everybody knows that, like everybody experienced that. Like, how do we stay connected? The unpopular view that I have on COVID is people are now like, well, how do we make sure people are performing, and how do we make sure leaders are leading, and how do we make sure that culture is still being built? And the unpopular part that I always say, well, how did you do it before? Because whether or not, like you and I are on a video across the world from each other right now, connecting on a really cool topic, how were leaders leading before? How were people performing? How did you measure productivity and performance before? And that makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to look at those systems and those programs and those processes ahead of time. I don't believe, and this is another unpopular, and when I say unpopular, I just mean the masses may not agree with me. I don't believe leadership changed because of COVID. Leaders always have needed to be resilient. Leaders have always needed to be adaptable. Leaders have always needed to pay lots of attention to the efficiency and productivity of their teams. And that didn't change. I think all COVID did was highlight a few of those competencies that maybe weren't on the forefront. And it highlighted for me as a leadership development expert, leaders are not being developed to understand how to drive performance and productivity as much as they need, because they would have figured it out. Like, how do you engage and how do you set the objectives? And this is where my sports analogy will come in. If you are a really good leader, you have the scoreboard, you have the playbook, you have your roster of talent that you recruited in the right role, playing the right position, and you're calling those plays. And if you look at a professional sports game, how many times do you see that communication? It's quick, it's all ongoing, and you don't take your eye off these giant jumbotron scoreboards all the time. And that's what coaches do, and that's what leaders should do. So whether or not you're getting in a meeting room, or you're on a Zoom call, or you're picking up the phone, or you're dropping by an office, it's all in the context of how are we progressing against these objectives. And that's why I challenge. I don't think leadership has changed. I think it highlights the people that were struggling leading performance prior to COVID, because now they can't see or see that, hey, what if they didn't start work till 10 a.m.? What are we going to do? And I always say, manage the result, not the clock, because some people can work a 6-hour day and kill it, and some people are working a 12-hour day chopped up. So who's more successful? And I always say the outcomes. Manage the outcomes. So I think COVID pushed the envelope on leaders needing to lead. And leadership is hard, and great leadership is rare. But leadership can be developed, and great leadership is rare because it is so hard. And people think, hey, it's this cool title, or it's this or that, but it's bigger than that.
Right. You're so right in saying that it is bigger than that. It's so many moving parts, so many components. It is complex, but it is, as you said, interconnect. Just isolate a certain part and try and fix these things and ignore the rest, and company will perform better. I'd like to ask you measurement. Obviously, when you help your clients, companies want to improve the bottom line, the top line. They just want to make more money. That's why they exist. How do you measure the impact of all the effort that goes into building a culture, building a great place to work? How do you translate that, especially to the C-suite and the CEO, that this effort is worth?
I would say, well, you gotta bring it all the way back to performance. So the board and the C-suite and the CEO are going to measure it through financial performance and operational performance, and they're kind of KPIs in that space. But when it comes to culture, now you've got this enigma of organizational performance and individual performance and team performance, and how is all of that translating? But culture, I mean, to me, culture is this a place that I want to be at? Is this a place that I can perform at my best? Is this a place that I feel accepted as my whole self? Like, can I come to work and be on fire? Can I contribute what I know I can contribute in a meaningful way? And am I being rewarded for that? And so now you got to go back and measure the human part. So you have your financial performance, and sometimes those don't correlate. And that's why I think it's so difficult for people, because you can have companies making profit that have terrible cultures, and you can have great cultures that may not be generating profit. And that's why you can't ever tackle culture without looking at performance and leadership. But I would look at a culture. I think, again, depends on how the CEO says culture. So when I look at that one CEO, his elements, like one of his elements was performance, and he was really clear, and he didn't want he wasn't measuring employee performance by the ratings, because he knew that system needed work. He knew people were overinflating ratings to try to get people paid or compensate for base pay issues. It was the actual result, pushing people to set the right objectives. The engagement, we looked at true engagement, like engagement being, again, going back to, do I come to work? Most days, not everybody's engaged every single day, but coming to work, feeling like the majority of my time, I'm in it. Like my head is here, my heart is here, my output is here. And the other way is, are people likely to stay? So performance and engagement, and how is that predicting someone's, so that's where the predictive analytics can come in. So I understand how people are performing. I understand how people are feeling about their engagement. Like, how do I feel about my performance and my focus to come in and do the work? And then how is that correlating or predicting my desire to stay and keep doing it?
Right. So yeah, it's all interrelated. And one of the reasons we say, I was asking this, is people ask this of me all the time. I was just as a guest on a show last night, and they were saying, how do you translate get C-suite buy-in? Because many people in our profession find it hard. I mean, obviously, and this was my answer, you have a great CEO. I mean, that's the answer to that problem, when you get somebody who understands and can push the agenda. But say you don't, and you still have to convince the C-suite that this is something that they need to do. As one of my answers was, you need to speak their language. Just like you were saying, they measure by financial performance. And it's hard for them to understand if you speak in a different language. So you need to kind of translate that into those figures. And I have been blessed. I've only been in this company for two years plus. I joined in January of 2019, and it was a tough time. We're having really, the industry is very, very competitive, and we were slipping. And fortunately, for the last 2 quarters, we have been maneuvering, outperforming the competition, and we have been rewarded for that as a company. And it does speak to a different type of culture. And as you said, people can feel and taste and look and hear differences in the organization. You don't necessarily translates to a index or a measurement score, but the C-suite especially can tell. They can see that people are more willing, more eager, more energetic, and it translates to better business performance as well. So I've been very, very blessed to be in this situation. But I do understand as well that some people, have been struggling and doing all the right things and checking all the right boxes, and the culture is still not moving, or the business is still not performing as expected. You're still not achieving your goals.
So go back to this is why I love the trifecta. If you're not performing and the culture's not where you want it to be, go to the last piece. Then your leaders are not leading. They're not either aligned with the vision, they're not doing the tough stuff, they're not communicating, or maybe they don't know why they exist. I say this all the time. One of the biggest fails in leadership is people they're not being told why leaders exist. Leaders exist to drive performance, and that means you have to be great at establishing the performance environment, and you got to be even better at benching the players that aren't playing the way you need them to play. Switch them out. You don't ever see a coach wait all, whatever it's periods or quarters or whatever. You don't see them wait the whole game to bench them. You're out, and you're out quick. And that's what's, I think, missing. So I would say that always go back to the trifecta. If one of the pieces is moving and the other one's not, then go back to your system. And you mentioned something really great, and I think this is where HR can raise their game. HR has to start thinking like a business owner and quantifying. And this isn't a generalized statement, because I know there's amazing HR people out there. But the reason why I think the CFO and I, when we worked together, connected, and we had a nice journey together through 2 companies, was he cared about the money in the context of the people. And he would say, can you give me the data? How much is my department costing me? And what's their contribution? And so he was not getting the data. So when we look at the biggest expense a company has is their people, he wanted to know how much it was all costing. And then he wanted to start to see that across all the departments, because these multi-million-dollar bonus pools are being paid out, but the performance wasn't there. So we started looking at talent portfolios to say, and I would challenge him. I'm like, you have 112 people in your finance department. And he goes, well, we have a lot of money to count. And we would laugh. And I was like, then your systems are broken because you do not, for this size, the systems, you need to pay attention to your systems because this is automated stuff. You don't need that many people doing something. Because he was looking at how do I become lean. And so when we start thinking of talent, and I know this is not inhumane to say, but we have to run a business. And sometimes 112 people is too much, and you can do it with 60. It doesn't mean that we're not humane. You treat people with dignity and respect, but you've got to manage your org design and your org structure so that people are performing the best way, providing the best service. So we should be recording our talent with, this is how much it's costing us. This is their contribution. Does that make sense? Are we getting what we want out of this portfolio?
Right. I can really see your passion for OD coming up right now. So,
I know it's really hard to contain sometimes.
Well, you know what, Tonia? It's almost 60 minutes that we've been online. We've been having so much fun. We lose the track of time. So, in closing, I need to ask this question. Are things really bigger in Texas?
Yes, it's crazy. So I was born and raised in New York, and then I had a 5-year stint in California. It is like everything, trucks, go to a restaurant, portions. All my friends that come in from other cities are like, why is this plate so big of food? I'm like, because you're in Texas. I guess, you need to eat like 5 meals worth at one sitting.
How long have you been in Texas?
This is my 3rd stint in Texas. I would say a total of probably 15 years.
Wow. So
Do
you consider it home now?
I do. My family's here. My dad was an oil and gas guy, so my parents moved here when I was 17, and so my siblings have all come down here, and my mom is still here. So yeah, this is probably home for a while anyways.
All right, Tonia, before I let you go, could you summarize our conversation, key takeaways from your perspective? What were the interesting things that you found and you learned from our conversation tonight, and what would our audience take home with them?
So I will admit, I have been mostly North American bound, a little bit in the Middle East and the oil and gas world. So I'm taking away just, wow, I'm seeing some of the questions and comments from people in countries that I've never interacted or operated or supported. And it's interesting to me to see the same people issues are going on all over the world, regardless of the cultural influence from those countries. People just want the same things in these businesses. How do I get the right people in and keep them and keeping them productive? So that was a huge thing, that people are facing all the same stuff that's going on over on this side of the world.
Right. So I really appreciate you coming and spending all this time with us. It's a great first meeting that we've had, and I do hope we'll talk and chat a lot more moving forward into the future. Thank you so much, Tonia, for sharing this great part of yourself with us tonight. And I hope the audience had a great time as well. There are a few questions that we didn't manage to touch. So we'd appreciate if you would go to the comment section of this post and perhaps repost it on your feed so that your audience can learn from this as well, and always view the recording. And I will go to the comment section and answer as many questions as I can as well. So with that, we'd like to thank you so much again. Please stay safe in these times. And as always, stay kind. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Good night. Good day, wherever you're from. Take care. See ya. Bye.